We're in Frankfurt, Michigan, September 1st, 1973. 15-year-old Terry Wayne Sutter leaves home, headed out to meet with his friends. By morning, he's deceased on a beach. Tragic. Also curious, because his lungs weren't full of water, they were filled with sand. Massive sand inhalation is what the autopsy found. His eyes and his nose were clogged. Globs of sand. His lungs were actually filled with it. He was missing his pants, one sock, and a shoe. There was also visible bruising across his face. These tragic circumstances begs a fundamental question. How did Terry manage to inhale enough sand to suffocate? Also, why nearly 50 years later has no one been charged with a crime? I'm John Genua, you're watching America's Strangest History. Tonight we're looking at what I consider to be one of Michigan's strangest unsolved mysteries. 15-year-old Terry Wayne Sutter. Tragic, but otherwise innocent accident, or something more sinister? You be the judge. Let's flesh this out because the geography actually matters. Terry was dropped off by his mother in downtown Frankfurt. She dropped him off in the heart of town somewhere in the evening hours of September 1st, 1973. That's the last place he was seen. That's our anchor point, downtown Frankfurt. His mother was the last verified person to see him. That's where Terry's evening began. From there, the trail goes cold. We know Terry intended to spend the night at his grandmother's nearby lake house, not at home. His mother didn't expect him back at the house that night. She expected him at his grandma's. Now, this wasn't unusual. Terry routinely spent summers and long weekends with his grandmother. It was a familiar and safe place. His parents were totally on board. It was routine. Grandma's house also happened to be a short walk to the bluff and pier. That's where his body and pants were later recovered. According to multiple witness accounts, Terry initially told friends he was heading out to the movies or the bowling alley. Others heard him say, "I'll be back in an hour." So either a movie for an hour or the bowling alley for an hour. Maybe, though an hour seems a little light to me. Ultimately, he never showed. By morning, Grandma got a call from the police. So we have vague plans, conflicting accounts, a curfew with Grandma. Something unexpected happened between the drop-off downtown and the following morning. Adding to the mystery, there weren't any warning signs, no apparent instigating event, no fight, no discernible cries for help. There's a lot that really doesn't add up here, including how a small town where everybody knows everybody and everything, nobody knew nothing. The following morning, September 2nd, a tourist walking along Frankfurt Beach spotted what they thought was a sunbather lying near the base of the bluff. It wasn't. It was Terry's remains. The initial assumption was drowning. Would make sense. A teenage boy out late, maybe slipped into the water, never came back. That's an easy assumption, but the autopsy told a completely different story. Terry didn't drown. His lungs were filled with sand. The coroner called it massive sand inhalation. His eyes and nose were jammed with grit. The sand was so heavily compacted, his lungs actually felt crunchy to the touch. The autopsy noted numerous contusions across his face and trauma to the neck and jawline. Some suggest these findings are inconsistent with what one might expect for a boy who simply slipped and fell. Then there's Terry's clothing. One shoe and a sock were gone completely. They were never recovered. His pants turned up days later on the pier. That's away from the bluff, away from where Terry's body was found. When police canvassed the approach to the bluff, they documented signs consistent with a meetup or hangout. They identified a six-pack with a few empties tied to Terry that night, and also disturbed flattened grass, like people had been sitting and smoking up there. The evidence gives us some pre-scene information separate and apart from the discovery site. Secondary accounts circulated from one witness recalls hearing the sound of a trunk slamming shut near the shore that night. Also, while not part of the official police report, later interviews with Terry's colleagues and friends overheard someone the next day mention, "I can't believe what they did to Terry Sutter." It's far from proof of anything, but maybe it can point us in the right direction. When police arrived at the beach the morning of September 2nd, they did what they usually do in drowning cases. They treated it like an accident. Officers logged the scene, but their first line in the sand, so to speak, was, A teenage boy slips into the lake and never makes it out. That's the baseline police investigators worked from. It shaped the investigation because the autopsy came back with something unexpected: massive sand inhalation. It raised some eyebrows concerning the initial assumption of an accidental drowning. Investigators floated a few theories. Maybe Terry was part of a buried in the sand prank gone wrong. Kids dig holes, cover each other up, things get out of hand. Maybe he fell from the bluff and inhaled sand on impact. Unlikely. That's a lot of sand. So much his lungs were filled with it. Maybe, as some darker notes in the file suggest, he was beaten, held down, or even forced to breathe in the sand. The prank theory quickly gained traction. It got airtime early on because it was tidy. People would prefer to imagine an accident instead of a crime. But the theory's weak. Friends who hung out with Terry said they'd never seen him play those kind of games before. It wasn't his style, not his personality. Also, assuming it was some kind of prank, why were his pants discovered days later on the pier? What happened to the missing shoe and the sock? Also, why the bruises? Not so tidy after all. Police interviewed locals, but what they didn't do is perhaps more impactful to the overall case. The pier's night caretaker, the very place where Terry's pants turned up, was never formally questioned. Got that? At least not in any surviving notes. Also, no one canvassed nearby cottages for fresh footprints or even tire tracks. Go figure. Then there's the timeline. Some reports say a tourist spotted Terry's body around mid-morning. Others actually say around noon, when a vacationing doctor called it in. Now, that discrepancy never got resolved, even though it seems to me that those are crucial hours for determining what happened to Terry. By the end of the first 48 hours, Frankfurt police had a deceased teenager, a coroner's report that didn't fit the accident narrative, and a town of people whispering about foul play. The first 48 hours in any case are critical. In Terry's case, they were already gone, and with them, maybe the only clean chance at justice. In most towns, a case like this would fade into the background, but in Frankfurt, Terry Sutter's death never quite went away. Every decade or so, it gets dragged back into the light, always with more questions than answers. In 1976, state police re-interviewed Terry's classmates as they graduated high school. One of them told investigators he'd been threatened with death if he ever talked about what happened. That's 3 years later, he was still terrified into silence. Then in 1986, Benzie County Sheriff reopened the case in response to public pressure. A one-man grand jury was convened to look at the case. Yeah, a one-man grand jury. It's a rare move used when authorities believe testimony won't actually come out in a standard courtroom. In this case, the grand jury, or maybe more specifically or appropriately, the grand juror, wasn't convened to indict a specific individual. The matter was designed to compel testimony from anyone who might know something meaningful about Terry's death. The objective of this indictment was purely investigatory, to break through the silence by drawing sworn statements. In fact, investigators gathered several hundred sworn statements aimed at uncovering details witnesses had previously withheld or recanted. These likely included descriptions of the people who attended the party that night, testimony relating to suspicious comments or threats, like statements that witnesses overheard something, for instance, "I can't believe what they did to Terry." I imagine they'd want to get their hands on any knowledge about movements, vehicles, or people near the bluff or the pier. And with respect to the terrified teens, maybe reports of witness intimidation or hush threats that hindered earlier cooperation. But even that fizzled out. No indictments, no new evidence brought forward, nada. Fast forward to 2009. A cold case task force opened up a tip line. For a moment, it seemed like justice might finally get some traction. Reporters even revisited the story in depth. Oddly enough, one journalist who dug too deep said he was threatened, told to stop asking questions. Another local recalled doors literally being slammed in his face whenever he brought up Terry's name. Curious. Instead of new evidence, what surfaced was a familiar cone of silence. Brings new meaning to the phrase, "Don't ask, don't tell." There were rumors about local households where kids liked to party. Whispers about drugs and violence. People bragging one day and clamming up the next. Every lead ends the same way: silence. By now, the pattern's pretty clear as day. Investigators restart, questions are asked, someone hints at the truth, and then everything collapses under their feet. Threats or refusal to cooperate. To me, it sounds less like a cold case and more like people trying to bury secrets, right? You think the story might end at the cemetery, but for Terry Wayne Sutter, there was no peace even in death. After his funeral, his family insisted on an open casket. They wanted people to see the bruises, so everyone could see what had been done. Terry was laid to rest in a small Benzie County cemetery. Sadly, the grave itself became part of the mystery. To start, the grave was vandalized almost immediately. Not just once, it happened over and over again. The headstone was cracked. A bush planted by his mother was ripped out. Flower pots were smashed. The family replaced what they could, but the desecration continued. Eventually, the Sutters were compelled to make a heartbreaking decision. They removed the headstone altogether. They left the grave unmarked. Imagine that. Your child not only murdered, but now his very resting place is continuously attacked. Now you have to erase his name just to give him peace. Why target the grave of a 15-year-old boy? Cruelty? Prank? Intimidation? Perhaps it's an ongoing message that silence is safer than asking or answering questions. Whatever the motive, the result was the same. Terry's family was left grieving with no answers and no justice. They don't even have a marked place to mourn their son. The truth was being buried, and the message from Frankfurt was clear: stop digging. Before I give you my theory, here's what we know. Terry is last confirmed downtown, dropped off by his mom. No verified sighting after that. He's found on the sand at the base of the bluff, not in the water. Autopsy, fourth time, massive sand inhalation with facial and neck trauma. Clothing anomaly, one shoe gone, one sock gone, pants show up on the pier days later. The approach to the bluff looked like a meetup place: beer cans, cigarette butts, flattened out grass area. The initial critical hours on the scene were treated like a drowning. Key canvas points, like the pier that night, weren't ever fully probed. Now for what I believe to be an overlooked forensic lead that almost nobody's talking about. If sand filled Terry's lungs, not just his mouth and his nose, it means that he actively inhaled it, presumably under force. That matters. It's why I keep repeating the part about his lungs. Different stretches of a beach can have distinct sand signatures like grain size, heavy mineral composition, microfossils, to name a few. If by some chance a piece of preserved tissue slides or paraffin blocks still exist from the autopsy, a modern forensic geology workup could try to match the lung sand. We could narrow down the location of his accident to a specific or microzones, like the beach at the base of the bluff and the pier, for instance, where his pants were later found. Forensics can even narrow down other areas that see, for instance, storm drain outflow based on examining these tiny grains. Finding a match might narrow down where Terry was forced to breathe sand and, by extension, who had practical access to that spot at night. Now for a working theory. My readout on the scene. Terry meets up with somebody near the bluff. The hangout ground tells us a meetup happened. There's an altercation. We see bruising on Terry's face, neck, and jaw. This seems consistent with a physical altercation. At some point, Terry is dragged to the beach, and then he's left in a spot where the waves wash in and out. His head and mouth are forced down repeatedly into a super saturated sand slurry. In this thin slurry, Terry doesn't just choke, he inhales the sand. This scenario explains the unusual sand-filled lungs. After Terry is incapacitated and left at the bluff, his pants, shoe, and sock were maybe lost in the struggle or taken as trophies. His pants may have been placed as a warning to be silent or positioned on the pier to intimidate or stage an innocent diving accident to redirect suspicion. Pants are planted at the pier days after the body is discovered. Maybe a third party found it somewhere, didn't want to get involved, and just left it on the pier for police to find. Whatever the case may be, the time gap is telling here. It's possible that whoever planted the pants was monitoring the investigation and felt safe enough to return. Why is this theory stronger than the buried in sand prank? Because pranks don't explain the split scene. Body here, pants planted later over there. They don't explain the facial neck trauma, and that doesn't explain the silence, the threats, the shut doors, all long after the prank ended. So what fits this fact pattern? A small group with local access, comfortable at the bluff at night, comfortable approaching the pier later to leave clothing. This creates an accident story while the town tells itself to move on. Time for my wish list. Forensic sand match. Locate preserved autopsy tissue slides and compare the lung and sinus grains to specific beach microzones. Remember the beach by the bluff and the pier. Terry's pants, more specifically the chain of custody. Any trace elements of pier dust, tar, or distinctive fill. Do the same analysis and comparison with the pants fabric as with the tissue samples. Any archived fabric or sand could have the same microzone match. How about the pier access roster? The roster would identify night personnel and after-hours access in 1973, like caretakers, maintenance, marina crews, anyone with keys. Witness outreach. I think it's prudent to treat surviving peers as intimidated witnesses. Start with confidential reporting, offer protection, or even immunity for lesser roles in exchange for identification of the primary responsible party. Weather and surf reconstruction. I'd like to see a full weather analysis of the conditions over the lake and in the town that night. Movement of the tides and the currents might provide valuable insight. Pull NOAA and Coast Guard weather logs for September 1st and 2nd, 1973. If they were breaking waves overnight, the bluffside zone becomes even more plausible as the place where it all went down. Terry Wayne Sutter didn't drown. He didn't trip into quicksand. He inhaled sand. Now, is this because someone pushed him into it again and again until he couldn't breathe? Or is it nothing more than a tragic accident and we'll leave it at that? I'm not convinced it was an accident. Are you? I'm John Genua. You've been watching America's Strangest History. Thanks for watching.